At the beginning of Michael Haneke's 1994 film 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, we are warned of an impending shooting by a young student that we assume will occur at some point during the film. As events unfold before us, we are introduced to Maximilian B., the man who will commit the act of terror the title card prognosticates, and a sense of underlying dread pervades throughout the rest of the runtime, as languid, elongated scenes of seemingly nothing happening seem to elicit a sense of suspense as they draw out the actions that will lead to the eventual climax. A deterministic feeling of objectivity is permitted to the audience, as we know before any of the characters do what will happen to them. Every scene focusing on Maximilian is given an immense potency, as we are aware of what will happen. So, as he exchanges guns in plastic bags, looks out of a window in a suicidal malaise, and is pressured by his table tennis coach, we become temporally aligned with the crazed gunman. Commencing 37 minutes and 57 seconds into the film, before reaching its climax in 39 minutes and 8 seconds in the film, this 1 minute and 11 second long take serves as an allegory for the film's split temporality. While at a cafe, two young men sit at a booth as people walk by, reflected in the glass. These two planes of actions are symbolic of the two planes of temporality that play throughout the film, with the glass acting as a symbolic parallel montage showcasing these two timelines. The fact that the people seem unaware as to the sinister actions that are taking place within this void reinforces their temporal separation. Moreover, the bookending of this sequence, with two black frames, fragments this moment off from all the other scenes in the film, suggesting that while the other characters that populate Haneke's 71 fragments march like the metronomic, deterministic arrows of time toward their collective eventual fate, we are taken along a path that is more privy to the eventual outcome. In his paper, Time and History, Critique of the Instant and the Continuum, Giorgio Agamben describes an event that breaks the continuity of temporal normality, disturbing the natural order as it comes outside of the pre-existing chronological world. In 71 Fragments, Haneke points to the climactic bank shooting and suicide as an event that signals a fracturing of chronotic time, where traditional notions of temporality are disrupted. It is my assertion, however, that the fact that we are made aware at the beginning of the film of the eventual outcome, the event that shatters temporal normality has already occurred, thus allowing for this fragmented chronology of dual timelines that is taking place. In the sequence, as our sonic capabilities are shut off from the conversation taking place between the men, Haneke understands that we can already gather what they are discussing due to the event of temporal fragmentation that begun the film. Judging from the opening title card, as we watch, we make assumptions as to what they are discussing. Through the information we have received, we understand that there are insidious implications woven into the very fabric of this scene, and we assume that this is drawing the characters closer to their eventual, almost apocalyptic demise. In Michael Haneke, The Intermedial Void, Christopher Rowe refers to an essay Haneke wrote for the premiere screening of the film, which asserts that fragmentation shifts the burden of interpretation more directly onto the spectator, suggesting an awareness by Haneke of the audience's involvement in the crafting of the film. This idea of audience involvement segues us into David Bordwell's notions of the sujet and fabula from his book Narration in the Fiction Film, where plot beats laid out by the director, the sujet, form a construction of the film as a whole in the mind of the viewers, the fabula, with audiences often piecing everything together in a logical, coherent, chronological story. This internal film is constantly shifting throughout the runtime and can twist and turn with new revelations in the plot. The fabula within the audience's minds at this point in the film is that these characters are all plotting something together. The recurring motif of the plastic bags and the creepy degradation of our auditory senses within this scene as the silence is almost rendered deafening allude to the events that we assume are taking place that was hinted at with the opening title card and will serve as the climax of the film. Haneke plays on our construction of the fabula in a similar vein with the intermediary news segments that crop up throughout, disrupting the film at moments in fragmentary intervals. Seemingly innocuous at first, Haneke trusts that we will not fully absorb the individual news segments in our formulation of the fabula, the reason being that they do not add to an idea of cause and effect narrative construction that is a large part of the scaffolding of Maximilian's progression through the story. But Haneke does ensure that we do recognise the news segments as an aspect of the movie through their continual repetition, playing into Bordwell's chart of temporal frequency in his previously mentioned novel Narration in the Fiction film, in which the news broadcasts are fabular events that occur more than once. Referring back to Christopher Rowe's Michael Haneke, The Intermedial Void, he goes on to assert that the news segments plays a large part in the construction of the film, as the black stills that bookend scenes are evocative of news segments. Thus, the black stills that serves to open and close the cafe scene evoke the harsh sterility of a dispassionate news program, creating a greater horror of an apathetic group of men planning an attack. But it is my assertion that the fact that news segments don't often blend into one another, that too plays into the idea of a split temporality, as this scene is still cut off from the timeline the other characters are traversing. However, our fabular formulation of these scenes of the young men exchanging guns and engaging in sinister dialogues, in that we believe that they are planning to commit a climactic shooting at the end of the film, is rendered futile by the climax. Maximilian's actions seem to erode both temporal realities, as it comes from an entirely new chronological world separate from cause and effect narrative logic. For reasons beyond comprehension, a series of mishaps pushes Maximilian over the line in the climactic moments of the film, and he begins randomly firing his gun in a bank. Our objectivity of the deterministic outcome of the characters has been proven false, and it signals the real Agamben-esque event that destroys previous notions of time, as both our ideas of the film's temporality and the characters are degraded. Looking back on our cafe sequence, you can even see foreshadowing of our lack of understanding as to what will occur by the end of the film. The large sensorium of noise from the outside world permeating this sequence, which, combined with the lack of auditory cues from inside the restaurant, suggests that while we believe we have access to their temporal line of action, we are actually merely in the realm of externality, unaware of what will really transpire at the end of the film. Reinforcing this lack of awareness, the framing of the men in a medium to long shot creates a separation from the characters, in particular Maximilian, whose back faces the audience. Our separation evokes a rejection by the characters of Leonardo da Vinci's assertion that the eye is the window of the soul, creating a distinct dissonance between the spectator and their temporal line of action. A motif of frames within frames is also evoked, as the screen of the window suggests that we are watching a scene play out, but we are distinctly separated from it, much like the projection of a film in a movie theatre, which creates a distinct lack of physical engagement from audience members. Having destroyed our previously constructed fabula of the film, Haneke further makes us question our engagement by repeating one of the news cycles that had taken place earlier, with the events of the shooting now slotted into the apathetic series of announcements. This makes us question our own apathetic rejection of the news stories that had been projected earlier in the film, and forces us to take note of the final news announcements we see at the end. They now achieve a sense of radiance they had not been allowed previously, and we are suddenly taking them in as a part of our constructed fabula. Looking back at the cafe scene, We now understand that the bookending of the scene with the black stills to evoke a fragmentary news show suggests that news stories have whole realities behind them, just like this film. We now question why we slotted in a scene such as this into our mental construction of the film instead of the news sequences, when this scene doesn't even play into the random shooting that occurs in the climax. Much like how we distance ourselves from news programs, we are symbolically cut off from the characters' conversation by the glass, transforming us into apathetic, voyeuristic spectators, such as the people projected on the reflective surface of the window, only able to peer in, but never able to fully engage.